You're listening to the #1 podcast for nonprofit leaders, getting your nonprofit fully funded. This is the Fundraising Masterminds Podcast.
If I said to you today, Jason, if you give me $1, I'll give you $10 back.
I'll give you as many dollars
as you can get. Jason, to put this in perspective, for direct mail, if we get a 2-to-1 return on investment, we're feeling pretty good. You add a phone call to that, you may add that to 3-to-1. A weekend like this is going to get us a 10-to-1 return on investment.
Welcome back to another episode at the Fundraising Masterminds Podcast. My name is Jason Galasinski, and with me, my co-host, Jim Dempsey.
Hi, Jason.
And we've got a great episode lined up for you this week. We are going to be talking about how to host a successful major donor event.
Yes.
And Jim, I'm excited about talking about major donor events because this is where a lot of the rubber can hit the road, right? As far as getting a lot done with a very few amount of people. But tell me a little bit about, what needs to be set up with the strategy, of putting on a major donor event. Because you can't just like walk in and put on a major donor event.
No, this is not, believe it or not, this is not just a Perfect Vision dinner on steroids. Yeah. It's not just let's add a couple days to things. Jason, if you're going to pull major donors together for a weekend, you've got to make sure that you have your priorities and your programs lined up. Mm-hmm. You need to find out what is it that you're going to be presenting to people over the weekend. And frankly, it really needs to be something of significance because your major donors really want to make a difference. They want to make an impact. They're looking for those organizations that are going to be unique and making a difference. And they want to invest in something significant. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, many organizations are seeing people willing to write $100, $250, $500, even $1 million checks or more. Wow. To help to fund programs and projects. Now, a lot of our viewers may not necessarily, or our listeners may not necessarily be in that stratosphere yet, but you could get there with the right programs and projects. So it's really important that we set up the weekend properly. Yeah. And we're going to be talking about important elements like what's the right venue, the program, and how to ask and when to do those things. Right. But there needs to be a lot of preparation beforehand. You need to be setting out what's the purpose, what do we hope to accomplish.
Well, and the more that we
weekend.
can target a specific thing, the better. You don't want to be going in saying, our organization is the best and we want to just have you give money to us because we do awesome work. And, you want to kind of go in with a specific targeted goal of, like usually, one call to action is what they always say in marketing.
That's
giving people too many options.
Confuses them,
and they don't end up doing anything.
Right, that's right. So. That's exactly right. Well, and Jason, it's really important, and I've just seen too many organizations do this, and maybe not these exact words, but the theory and the principles there is that, just give us as much money as you possibly can and we'll accomplish what we need to accomplish with that. Yeah. So in other words, we wait for our partners to say how much do you need, and our response is how much do you have, and we try and sell smoke and mirrors, or we try and sell something that's overarching. Yeah, we'll do what we can do with whatever money you give us. Well, do
you think that would work really well in Shark Tank?
Not at all. No, that's a recipe for disaster, and it's exactly the same way, Jason. A great analogy of Shark Tank because that's exactly what
you're sitting in front of people who have millions, maybe even billions.
Yeah, and want to maximize, and they want to make a good investment, and they want to see a good return on that investment.
But it doesn't always mean that they're going to give you all their money.
No,
they're
not at all.
A lot of times they're looking for what's the strategic amount of money that we need to invest
to make the difference,
to make a maximum difference.
Right, that's right.
It might not be 10 million, it might be 1 million.
Right.
But They're looking for the maximum return on investment.
That's right.
So yeah, we're going to talk about 4 key principles for putting on a major donor event. And but Jim, have you done any major donor events recently?
Well, Jason, actually, over the last 40 years, I've had the privilege of really doing hundreds of major donor weekends. And before you step into a major donor weekend, you need to count the cost. Scripture talks about counting the cost on things. Yeah. A weekend like this is very expensive. And if you're going to pull people into this is not just once again, as I mentioned, it's not just a vision dinner on steroids. So your costs for this kind of event, in some cases, you can even add a 0 to the end of your expenses that you do for your dinner, because you're generally pulling people into an event where you're covering the cost for the weekend, and you are providing everything from the moment they set foot on that property. They have to get there to your location. But you want to find a place that people look forward to going to. The example that you're referring to is one of our last ones that we just had. Cru, the campus ministry of Cru, goes around the country and does major donor events in various cities. We survey, we talk to our major donors, and we say, what are the venues that you like to go to? Which ones do you go to regularly, or which ones would you wish you could go to regularly? And so as a result, we make our choices of the venue and the selection. Well, last spring, we made the selection to go to the Arizona Biltmore. And the Arizona Biltmore is considered a Hilton Curio collection. And over the last 3 summits that we do, we refer to them as summits, our major donor weekend, because you're bringing people to the top of the mountain and they're seeing all that God is doing in the world. So we've used the Hilton Curio collection for the last 3 years. Prior to going to the Arizona Biltmore, we went to the Hotel del Coronado in San Diego in Coronado Island. But the Arizona Biltmore is a very unique and special property. It's like going to an old-time resort, although they've moderned it up. So it's very fresh, airy, totally remodeled, but it has the old style feel. So people walk in the door and immediately they feel luxury, they feel comfort, and they feel like they're going to be cared for, and they were cared for. And that's a key item, because not only do we want to make sure we take care of them, but we want a property that's going to care for them. So the property has to care for them. We create a whole hospitality team whose sole goal, from the moment they hit send on their reservation on our website to the time that they arrive, and including that time, our goal is to cater them, to serve them, to eliminate as many barriers or restrictions to comfort as they have. So the venue that we chose for this last summit was an excellent venue. Overarching, we had a $17 million goal, and through program, which we'll talk about in just a minute, but program speakers and an effective list of priorities and an effective challenge, we were able to raise over $4 million last year
weekend.
On that particular weekend. So,
it's
exciting.
Yeah, and I mean that was our first point, right?
Yeah,
is choose an effective venue. Now, this is not something, obviously. You don't want to be inviting people to your local town church hall.
Well, or your Holiday Inn, for sure. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Or not even like a really good hotel.
No, that's right.
We're looking for
4- and 5-star hotels.
Yeah, really fancy. And again, I'm sure our listeners are listening to that going, well, that's going to cost a lot of money.
And what's the appearance of that? Does that sound like we've got all this money, and why are we throwing around the opulence of that? The one of the things the Cru does, which is effective, is we have a handful of partners who help to cover the cost of that. So when people say, wow, is my money or is Cru covering this? We can generally say we've got a handful of people who it's so important for them that you're there. No, Jason, there is no underwriting or sponsoring. You have people who give this as a gift to our people who come.
Well, thanks
this
for clarifying.
Is not an underwriter or sponsor. We can say that there's people who are interested in you being there, and as a result, they are helping to ensure that you're there.
Right.
Now, it's important. The cost of these can be anywhere as low as $199 to nowadays we are probably paying $469 a night for some of these rooms. And though that may seem like outrageous, you need to remember that these are the properties that these people are going to regularly. Yeah. They would actually have to really step down to go to a Holiday Inn. Now, they may say, well, they're willing to do that. And you will have some people that say, we are willing to do that for your organization. Go to a Holiday Inn for a weekend like this. But frankly, those people we're going to give to you anyway. You're trying to open up the door for new major donors who need a little enticement to get on a plane and to come. Yeah. And a venue like that is so important.
It's just like with anything, right? Like you got to speak the language of the person. So if you're trying to get into the world of a multi-million-dollar business owner, you've got to kind of meet him where he's at.
Right.
You can't expect him to come to the ghetto of Chicago. You know, he's just not going to do that.
Right. That's right.
So it's really just, it's not so much about, being ritzy and fancy, on purpose.
Right.
To manipulate them or whatever, or woo them. But it's more just like, you're just coming up to their level,
right? And
you're just meeting them where they're already at. They're used to these kinds of venues. We may not be used to them, but this is where they live and breathe.
That's right.
So you're just kind of meeting them where they're at, and where they're comfortable already.
Yeah.
And now, that's really important.
Now, we may have, some people turned off the video at this point, but I hope that most of you are staying with us because it's so important that you do provide a venue that people look forward to going to. Just as we find a venue that people look forward to going to, either Vision Dinner, it's even more important for this.
Okay. Now, when we talk about, having a major donor event,
right?
It's important we select the venue,
right?
But the second thing that we want to be doing is we want to be inviting every donor personally,
right?
This isn't something that you just send a text message out or an email or whatever. So explain what you mean by that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, and frankly, I'm kind of glad you said inviting every donor in the sense and donor or partner, but I say that because a good majority of the people who do come to these events are already giving to us. We will have some new people who come in that this weekend is their first introduction to Crew, but many of them already give to us, and what we're trying to do is take them to the next level. Remember our old formula: win, keep, and lift. Winning people your cause, keeping them through cultivation, and lifting them to a higher giving level. This event, without a doubt, is directed towards lifting. So you've got our minimum for these events is $10,000, and a lot of my colleagues have events where their minimum is $25,000 to $50,000 on these events. Now, normally we will see anywhere on the low side to 30 units of people, so approximately 60 people to 100 plus units of people coming to this. So that'd be about 200 people. So when you're talking, that might seem like 60 to 200 people may seem small, but when you think that every one of these people have the capability of at least writing a check of $10,000, and our response card starts at $25,000. Yeah. So, so when you have that many people in the room with that capability, it's a nice special avenue for them. But you're talking about the personalization, and that's the important part. This is think about this as a very elite event for elite people. Now, you wouldn't use
There's not a lot
those
of people
terms.
coming too. Like you said, 100 units are coming.
Exactly.
So it's not like you're inviting thousands of people.
That's right. And frankly, you don't want it because you lose the intimate setting that you have, because the expectation is where a Vision Dinner, you're seeing the executive director, but you're not interacting with the executive director. At these events, your executive director is sitting at the tables with those people. You're seeing that person. You're riding up in the elevator with the executive director. You are interacting in in private settings with them. So this is an event to connect with people. So the invitations have to be personalized. This is not yes, like you said, let's mail to 1,000 people. This is a very targeted group of people. And we want to really make sure that those invitations are personalized. Because when you're asking someone to spend a weekend with you, that's a big investment. And it's a big investment on relationships. Jason, you and I have talked many times about how for introverts, just a lot of interaction, human interaction for any length of time can be extremely draining. And especially for introvert partners, our donors, for them to spend a weekend with someone that they only nominally know, that could potentially be very draining. So you've got to, on both ends, you're both trying something new. They're investing their time, and you're investing your time in those relationships. So that's why it really takes a very personal and a special invitation. Now, do we printed materials? Absolutely. Just like with a vision dinner, we've not gotten to the point yet where we've become totally electronic. In fact, this event actually is ratcheted up. The appearance of the invitation is ratcheted up significantly. Whereas an example, we might spend $1.50 to $2 on an invitation for a vision dinner. This kind of event, you might be spending $5 and in some cases even $10 an invitation for the marketing of these kinds of things because it's so significant.
All right. Well, the third thing you want to do in putting on a major donor event is create a dynamic event program. And I think it's really important, like we said before, that this program is targeted. This program has specific purpose. We don't want to overwhelm them with too many options, and but we have a very specific route that we're putting them down. And
the path.
And so tell me a little bit about how you have put together these things in the past.
Well, Jason, the one similarity that we really do have to the Vision Dinner strategy is the structure. We still want to share what the problem is. We want to let people know what the solution is, being our organization, how we attempt to solve that, what are our programs, our projects, our strategies, and then where are we headed in the future, and then give people that significant challenge. So generally what I do is I start out with Friday night painting a picture. What's the problem that exists? For our organization, that focuses a lot on the younger generation, especially in this day and age, Gen Z. The last few years, we've called in a Gen Z expert, someone who can unpack and explain to these people, knowing, and it really is a kind of a fun time, even though it may sound very serious. It's a fun time for the builder generation and the baby boomers to get a good understanding of what Gen Z is and why they do what they do. We hear a lot of, that's why my grandkids or that's why my kids do what they do. Here's what they're motivated by. Here's what they're encouraged. There's a lot of people who have written off Generation Z, the younger generation, and just said, this is a generation that's just lost. There's no hope for them. They're entitled. But anyway, all that to say is there's a lot of people who have written off this generation coming up, and we want to give them hope for this generation, that this generation is actually empowered. These people this generation wants to be entrepreneurs. They want to help people. They do have a passion for something of faith. And they want to believe in something.
It's almost like they're interested in spirituality. I know
that's
a
exactly
big
right.
buzzword.
Broad term, but it's very true. And guess what? Crew's got the answer to those issues. And by leading them to Christ, we can utilize those gifts and talents and skills, and we can train up the next generation. But that's day 2. So we paint them the picture of the next generation. And then the next morning, we lead off with a devotional, but weave into, here's where we're headed in the future with this next generation. We talk about the ways that we reach this generation through Bible studies, through small group, through individual, through large group settings. And we talk about three things. We talk about winning people to Christ, building up on their faith, and sending them out to lead others to Christ. So that's our strategy. But then we talk about the future, and this is where, like I use that $17 million that we put out there, a $17 million opportunity to help to accomplish what we refer to as the expansion plan. What's going to take our ministry to the next level.
Yeah.
And we focus and outline that. We give people, they're there not only to hear from us, but they're here to relax a little bit as well too.
Yeah.
And then we come back that evening and share more about where we're headed in the future, why it's important, why is the helping to fulfill the Great Commission in this generation important, and then we talk to people, we challenge them.
Yeah,
sprinkled
it
in there.
Sounds a lot like the Perfect Vision Dinner timeline.
It does
in terms of what we do.
Well, at least the content. Yeah, at least the content is there. So many of the kinds of things. The beauty of a weekend, though, is that you can unpack those kinds of things. Whereas at best, you've got 13 minutes to do a ministry update. Here you've got an hour and a half to 2 or more hours, and really you've got 5 segments on a weekend.
It's more like a conference.
Very much.
Where you can really dive deeper into things.
Exactly. And that's really what makes people give.
Yeah.
For the Perfect Vision Dinner, for some people, you're getting a tip, and that might sound it might sound condescending in a sense, but for a lot of the major donors, they're just scratching the surface. First of all, we've talked about in other videos, we talked about that 95% of people's total wealth is in assets. And so at a Perfect Vision Dinner, you tend to be getting mostly their liquid, their current income, their current cash. But in a weekend like this, we intentionally focus in on that asset giving.
Well, now I'm kind of interested to know, because you said your goal was 17 million,
yes,
and you raised 4.
Right.
So would you consider that to be a bad event?
Oh man, that's a major accomplishment. Yeah,
But you didn't reach your goal.
Our overall goal for the project was $17 million.
Okay.
So this is not the only event we do. We do 125 vision dinners, Perfect Vision Dinners around the country. We do a $4 or $5 million direct mail effort. We also have a small foundation effort. We have a mega
okay, so this 17 million was like
one
it's your overall.
It is our
goal.
largest effort. Yes, exactly. Now, Jason, to put this in perspective, because I think that's always important.
Yeah.
When we are spending a lot of money on an event like this, it's important to remember that for direct mail, if we get a 2-to-1 return on investment, we're feeling pretty good. You add a phone call to that, you may add that to 3-to-1. A weekend like this is going to get us a 10-to-1 return on investment. If I said to you today, Jason, if you give me $1, I'll give you $10 back. Do you think you're going to just stay at $1, or you think you're going to give me maybe a few $1,000s or even tens of $1,000s?
I'll give you as many dollars
as you can get. That's exactly right. Yeah. So when people ask, is it worth it? It is. I mean, where else in development are you going to get a 10-to-1 return on investment other than going face to face? And you can't go face to face with everyone, but it's in a really highly effective way.
Yeah. So Jim, on the topic of like developing the program, if you wanted to do a weekend, type of event like this, what elements would be into a weekend event like this?
Definitely the elements that I just talked about, which is, you want to make sure you state the problem, and you want to have the solution. You want to have your programs and projects, and you want to go ahead and focus on the future. Typically on a Friday to Sunday segment, and there's some organizations that go Thursday to Sunday, but ours happens to go Friday to Sunday. We will focus in on the first night on the problem. We'll come back on Saturday morning, the first half of Saturday morning, so essentially about 8 o'clock to about 10:30. We'll focus in on those programs and strategies that we do, and then we'll go from 10 o'clock to 10:30 to noon. We'll go to focusing in on the forward process, the forward strategy, our accelerators and our priorities. And that is equivalent in the dinner strategy to the first half of the appeal. So we let people know a lot about where we're going that second half. So at this point, we're at noon. We do an optional asset management seminar. So we talk about our crew foundation and how they can help you manage your assets. And then we also talk about a program called History's Handful, which we've talked about before, which is how do you become part of a $1 million giving club. But then we give them the rest of the afternoon to rest, to relax, to refresh, but also to process through what they just heard and what they're going to give. Because we prepare them that we're going to be asking you to come back with your commitment envelopes at the end of the night. And we'd like for you to fill those out at the end of the night after you've heard the rest of the program. So then we come back, in a sense, almost like the Vision Dinner with this is the keynote speaker equivalent on Saturday night. So we generally have a dynamic speaker. A lot of times it's the executive director who kind of brings everything all together. You've heard all these pieces. Let's pull them all together in a nice box and tie it with a bow. And then we do our appeal. Now, Sunday morning, we come back because it's Sunday morning and people are used to church. We come back with a nice, solid devotional / sermon. And then we also give people an opportunity to be involved from the life aspect. So labor influence, we've already talked to them about the finances, but the labor influence and expertise side of things. So we focus in on that after we've asked for money. So that's essentially the program and how we plug it in the different parts.
Okay. Well, that gives me kind of a good idea of what you guys do.
Yeah.
And hey, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, wow, this is crazy, I would love to do this more. I'd love to learn more about this. Let us know in the comments below. And while you're in there, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel, or if you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, subscribe, because we got great new content like this coming out. And I also wanted to take an opportunity to just mention that since we're on the topic of major donors, we actually have a major donor mastery class that we've put together. This is an online program you can pay. This is an online program you can sign up for at any time. I'm going to put a link and a QR code on the screen and in the description. But go ahead and check that out, because we dive deep into the topic of major donors, specifically in the area of follow-up. And that's really my fourth point as we finish this episode. Is the fourth thing is following up with your major donors.
Right.
Now, it might seem easy in a way, easier to put on a program, because it's in this context of there's a lot of momentum and there's a lot of things working for you.
Right.
But the rubber really hits the road on the follow-up, and that's really where people have the face-to-face conversations, the follow-up calls, and that's the part where our course really addresses how to do this.
Right.
And this is really where the rubber hits the road, right?
Yeah,
For a lot of people.
Yeah.
You could have the perfect major donor event and fail to follow up in the right way and miss out on a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, that's right.
So talk a little bit about how important follow-up is.
Well, there's really three key components that come to the follow-up side of things. Number one, we have some individuals who still hadn't fully processed, and they said, I need a little bit more time to pray about this. Call me in the next few days. So some of that is wrapping it up and tying it in a bow for some of those individuals and getting their commitment. Number two, we're calling to thank every single person who's there. And remember, these are significant donors. And so we want to make sure that we are personally thanking every single person. And frankly, we even take it to the extent that not only did the person who invited them thank them, but we also, in a lot of cases, have our executive director pick up the phone and call those people. Because, someone makes a $500,000 million plus commitment, we're giving attention.
Right.
And the last area is just processing through the other elements that are there. They're areas of involvement. We'd like to receive your materials. We'd like to be part of the labor. We'd like to find out from the labor, the influence and the expertise opportunities that are out there. What are ways that we can be involved in that?
Yeah. Well, there you have it. The 4 key ways of putting on a major donor event. So just to recap real quick. Number 1, we want to choose an effective location. Number 2, invite the partner personally. Number 3, create a dynamic program.
Yep.
And finally, number 4, follow up immediately.
Yes.
You don't want to let that linger
No.
for too long.
Especially if someone came for a weekend.
Thank you, Jim, for this wonderful insight.
Happy to do
It's
it.
just so great to be able to pick your brain on all this stuff because I don't come across a lot of people that have the 40 years of experience working with major donors. Like you said, you've done hundreds of these things, and so I'm sure you've learned a lot over the years. And as you fine-tuned this process and worked with a team of people, your insight is invaluable. So
thanks to God be the glory. He gets the glory for these events. Yeah.
And thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Fundraising Masterminds podcast. I hope that you found this to be really helpful, and we will see you again on the next one.
Take care.